early voting underway in Georgia's Senate runoff. Voting began this weekend after the state's Supreme Court denied a Republican bid to block voting on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. As many as 22 of the state's 159 counties let voters cast their ballots on Saturday. The runoff between Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock and Republican challenger Herschel Walker is next Tuesday, December 6th. Meanwhile, Senator Warnock is out with a new ad that shows voters just simply reacting in real time to Herschel Walker's puzzling campaign speeches.
Just handed him the mic. Said, here you go, Herschel, talk.
They just played the video for them and, well, take a look.
Here we go.
You ever watch a stupid movie late at night hoping it's going to get better, don't get better, but you keep watching it anyway? Because the other night I was watching this movie. I was watching this movie called Freak Night, or some type of night, but it was about vampires. I don't know if you know vampires are cool people.
What the hell is he talking about?
Is he serious? Is he for real?
But I'm going to tell you something that I found out. A werewolf can kill a vampire. Did you know that?
What is he talking about?
I never knew that, so I didn't want to be a vampire anymore. I wanted to be a werewolf.
Oh, my gosh.
He's talking about vampires and werewolves right now.
Y'all serious about this, right?
So I've been telling this little story about this bull out in the field with 6 cows.
Earth.
And 3 of them are pregnant.
There's no substance. There's nothing.
So you know you got something going on.
It makes me want to laugh, and then it makes me think we're in trouble.
But all he cared about is kept his nose against the fence, looking at 3 other cows that didn't belong to him. Now all he had to do is eat grass.
This video is ridiculous. That's 35 seconds of my life I'll never get back.
Why would I want someone like that leading the state of Georgia?
Our good air decided to float over to China, bad air.
Unbelievable.
So when China gets our good air, their bad air gotta move.
It's all the same air.
Not only does it make no sense, I don't even understand what he thinks he's saying.
So it moves over to our good air space. And now we gotta clean that back up.
I sit and watch these on Twitter, and I'm like, what the heck is this guy talking about? Like, literally, what is he talking about?
He's completely unqualified for this really, really serious job.
No one's watching this and being like, oh, man, that guy's got it together.
And sometimes, like, I read through the comments because I'm like, is anybody actually understanding, or are we just sitting here wasting time?
It is embarrassing. Let's call it what it is. It is embarrassing.
They just care about getting a yes man, somebody that'll just punch the button.
I think it's a risk to me and millions of Georgians to put this man in a position of power.
Let's call it what it is. This is embarrassing as hell.
At all. I mean, well, you know.
Oh,
Wow.
my God. So, 2 great lines out of there.
That's an impressive ad.
First of all, Herschel's line, so you know something's going on there when he talks about the 3 pregnant cows. Not sure what that is.
What the heck?
But I love
Yucky.
the one voter said, I don't think he even understands what he's saying. Yeah, he does.
I mean, he can't.
No,
I think he just keeps going. Let's bring in political reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Greg Bluestein. Also with us, member of the New York Times editorial board, Mara Gay, and Reverend Al Sharpton is still with us as well.
So, Greg, quite an ad, letting Herschel Walker's words, try to speak for themselves. We just sort of go around in circles. But man, the images this weekend from Georgia, those lines were crazy. It looks like a lot of people very interested in this special election. What can you tell us?
Well, there was a turnout surge. Senator Warnock had about half a dozen events all over Metro Atlanta this weekend, rallying voters to the polls, and the turnout was huge. About 156,000 voters cast ballots this weekend, mostly in Metro Atlanta and other Democratic-leaning areas, so Democrats are very confident. Meanwhile, Herschel Walker didn't have any public events, and that's why Democrats are confident now. They're banking votes to give them a cushion ahead of December 6th runoff.
So have you talked to Republican leaders? Have you talked to Republican politicians in the state? Is there any evidence? And again, this isn't like a leading question for the MSNBC crowd. I'm just genuinely curious. Are Republicans concerned about a lack of interest on their side while you have Democrats obviously very excited about what happened a month ago, thinking, hey, we can get a 51st senator?
Without a doubt. The moment that Democrats clinched control of the U.S. Senate, it took away one of Herschel Walker's biggest arguments, which was to those skeptical Republican voters, a vote for Herschel Walker was still a vote for a check on President Biden and was still a vote for Republican-controlled Senate. They no longer have that argument, and so now it's that much harder for Herschel Walker to get those kind of middle-of-the-road, skeptical Republicans to come back out, because many of them are either going to vote for Senator Warnock or just stay home on December 6th.
Myra, you know, when I was looking at the commercial that the Warnock campaign put out on Herschel, and I heard them kept saying embarrassing. And as one that you know has been involved in civil rights all my life, to think that we fought for representation in someone that's clearly not qualified, just put there because he's black. And he may be good in other things. I'm not taking that away from him. I mean, embarrassing. As someone looking at this, do you understand that some of the turnout we're seeing, and I'm hearing it from people that I know in Georgia that I work with, is that we cannot shame what we've achieved in terms of vote access. I mean, this is the state that Martin Luther King was born and buried in, by having representation that's clearly unqualified to serve in the Senate.
I mean, given what the Republican Party has come to stand for and stand against, which in part is simply black people at this point, and access to democracy and to citizenship, the idea that the Republican Party in 2022 would put forth a candidate who, among other things, is also a black man, to kind of usher in more voter repression and more of what the Republican Party stands for is cynical. The thing that makes it, though, really disturbing to me is just the overall message to voters, black and white, that one black man is just as good as another. One black man is the same as any black man. So it doesn't matter if you're Barack Obama, it doesn't matter if you're Raphael Warnock, it doesn't matter if you're Herschel Walker. They're all the same. You're all the same. And voters should see you that way. And it's also just an insult to black Americans, but to all voters.
That's the sort of racist aspect of this. It's truly insulting. But Greg, I just wonder, I mean, with this candidate who has now been on the national stage, he's gotten a lot of airtime. Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham sit on either side of him to help him get through interviews. It's very clear to, you know, a practical-minded person that this is a mentally and intellectually impaired person, to say the least. There have been multiple women who have come out and said that he's paid for abortions. He's lied about it. His children, his adult children, have come out vehemently against him, calling him a repetitive liar and womanizer. I just wonder, what does the common sense Republican in Georgia say about this candidate or feel about this candidate? And what are you hearing?
Yeah, well, there's generally three different blocks of Republican voters. One are a group that doesn't believe any of those accusations, that believes it's all fake news. And that's a significant portion of the Republican Party here. There's another that believes it but doesn't care because they'll never vote for a Democrat, or they'll always want to vote for whoever the Republican nominee is. But then there's that third crucial block of voters that played the decisive role in the midterm. 200,000 voters backed Governor Brian Kemp, a Republican, but did not support Herschel Walker. And that was the difference between an outright Republican win and the runoff we're in. And that's why Senator Warnock is making sustained appeal to them right now.
So, Greg, it's so fascinating, this election. You know, beforehand I'd said, well, you know, the Republicans in Georgia seem more reasonable. They still seem like Main Street Republicans compared to those crazy Republicans in Arizona. Then those crazy Republicans in Arizona ended up not being so crazy. They're like, wait a second, we will vote for Republicans, and they did. I mean, they voted for Republicans up and down the ticket. They sent them to Congress. They just didn't vote for the crazy ones, which I find fascinating, that Arizona and Georgia are still so much alike, both in 20 and in 22. What can you tell me? Is there sort of a battle for the future of the Republican Party in Georgia? And I would just say, as a former Republican, are the Main Street Republicans, my sort of old faction, are they getting the upper hand right now?
I would say there's been a civil war in the Republican Party in Georgia for years, but I'd say right now the mainstream Republicans in Georgia are ascendant because Brad Raffensperger won, Brian Kemp won. all these pro-Trump challengers, with the exception of Herschel Walker, really, lost their statewide primary challenges or their statewide primaries. And so it's Herschel Walker who stands alone. But, in that sense, too, even without Donald Trump's endorsement, he could have very well have emerged as the Republican nominee because of his name recognition, because of his ties to University of Georgia football, because of all those sort of intangible qualities that he has. But of course, as you heard him on the campaign trail, those stories that you just saw in that TV ad, we've heard them on the campaign trail for weeks. These were not, for the most part, one-offs. He's talked about that cow story over and over again. And so a lot of times when voters hear them in person, when voters hear them in person, they kind of, did he really say that? Is he really talking about that? And so that's the real challenge that Republicans have right now.
Wow.
Does he think does he know what's he saying with the cow story?
We need to let Greg go.
A political reporter for the Atlantic Journal-Constitution, Greg Bluestein, thank you very much.
So Reverend Al, we understand, like, preachers and politicians repeat stories, but that cow story where bull gets 3 cows pregnant and then
he's got something going on.
He says he's got something, and then he goes to the other side. You just are talking about pregnant cows and vampires and werewolves. You're thinking he just got out in front of himself and didn't know where to land that plane in that story. But Greg tells us this is part of his shtick.
Absolutely. The fact that he continues to do it means that he didn't just know how to land the plane that one time you're making a speech. He didn't know how to operate the plane because he keeps bringing the same plane back up that he can't land. And then for a man that's been accused of trying to get 4 women or persuading 4 women to get an abortion, to even be talking about cows and bulls and something's going on there. I mean, there's a disconnect here with reality that there's certain things he needs to not even try to imply or insinuate that would bring people back to his negatives. I mean, it's the most amazing display of political malfunction I've seen in the process. To have a candidate like this is the ultimate cynical move that Donald Trump did, is I'm going to just put a black guy out there well-known against a black guy because all of them are the same, and it doesn't matter. He's got more name recognition than Raphael Warnock. That was the thinking. Yeah. And the fact that the Georgia Republican Party allowed Donald Trump to intimidate them into doing this, and now Kemp is supporting it, is outright ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, think about the celebrity thing. It's caused chaos in Georgia. It lost the Senate seat in Pennsylvania with Dr. Oz. Yeah. It lost in Arizona, where they get a TV anchor that everybody in Phoenix knows. They lost that race.
That's amazing.
I mean, the celebrity stuff has not worked well.
No, and in Arizona, the celebrity stuff, there was a real thought that it might work. It did not.
No.
Former president and current presidential candidate Donald Trump is now distancing himself from a known white nationalist after hosting him for dinner at Mar-a-Lago last week. On Tuesday, Trump welcomed anti-Semite Nicholas Fuentes to his Palm Beach estate. Also there, Kanye West, who has recently faced backlash for anti-Semitic comments of his own, as well as a former Trump campaign staffer. Now, a source tells NBC News that Trump was very impressed with Fuentes, a Holocaust denier, who the former president now claims he did not know beforehand.
It's crazy. Maura, Republicans have always been so self-righteous about their support for Israel, and we support Israel, and you'll hear Donald Trump asking the question, why don't more Jews vote for us? They only get like 35% of the Jewish vote, Republicans usually in national elections. So why don't more Jewish people vote for us? Here's Trump hugging an anti-Semite who has gone out of his way, saying, even mocking Adidas, I can say all the anti-Semitic things I want to say, they can't do anything about me. And then you've got, a Holocaust denier, a guy who jokes about victims of the Holocaust being burnt cookies, a guy who's just an open fascist, neo-Nazi, white supremacist, and he walks into the White House, and Republicans silent, for the most part, silent, and they wonder why they keep losing elections.
That's right. I mean, a lot of attention is paid to parts of the Jewish community that do actually support the Republican Party. And of course, that's a very real phenomenon. But the reality is, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, that the majority of American Jews do vote Democratic. And when you see these pictures of Donald Trump with Nick Fuentes, you know why. Because behind every closed door, you have to wonder, what are people really thinking? What do they think about me, my people, whether you're black, whether you're Jewish? And this is just one of those icky moments where it was said out loud. It's extremely disturbing. And I'm also just embarrassed on the international stage. I mean, to have a former president palling around with these people, it's an embarrassment to all of us.
It really is. Joining us now, political investigations reporter for The Guardian, Hugo Lowell. And Hugo, you have a new report that the former president made clear he does not want to criticize Nick Fuentes for fear of antagonizing a devoted part of his base. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, that's right. So we were hearing over the weekend that Trump got calls from a number of aides in the wake of his dinner saying, he really needed to denounce Nick Fuentes because he's such a problematic figure. And the fact that he was having dinner with not just one anti-Semite, but two anti-Semites, he needed to do something to distance himself from the entire affair. And they really tried to suggest ways he could get out of it. They were giving him drafts of language, really making it easy for Trump to denounce Nick Fuentes, and he just could not bring himself to do it. And at some point, he just told them, look, I'm not going to denounce Nick Fuentes. The best I will do is to say I don't know him. And that was the bottom line. And I think at some point, a lot of these aides just gave up and said, look, we can take the Holster water, but we can't make it drink. And the fact that he would remove these lines out of statements, he would remove language saying, Nick Fuentes is unashamedly a bad guy. I think that kind of speaks volumes.
And Jonathan Mir, nothing new about this. By the way, following up on what Maura was talking about. So Donald Trump only got 30% of the Jewish vote, 70% going to Joe Biden in 2020. But Jonathan O'Meara, again, this is nothing new. Like Donald Trump, people say, oh, he's not a fascist, he's not this, he's not that. Donald Trump refuses to condemn fascists. He refuses to condemn neo-Nazis. He refuses to condemn white supremacists. He refuses time and time again to Klansmen saying, oh, I don't know who David Duke is. As you pointed out earlier, I don't know who David Duke is. I don't know what the Klan was. I don't know about the Proud Boys. I don't know about Q. And now he's saying, I don't know who this Nick Fuentes is. Oh, he does. He does, and he refuses to condemn this Nazi.
He refuses to condemn all those domestic folks, as well as the likes of Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un and fascists across the world stage. This is what he does. And certainly, Hugo, this is in part, as you have reported, he doesn't want to alienate what he knows is part of his political base. But this moment comes just 2 weeks or so after his rather lackluster announcement of his new presidential campaign. He is still most powerful voice in the party. It is still his party, so let's take this with a grain of salt. But there does seem to be some Republicans willing to step in there and criticize what he's doing, Republicans who are willing to perhaps mount their own presidential bid. How concerned are the people around Trump that maybe this could fracture at least somewhat his GOP support?
I think there are two elements they're concerned about. I think the first thing is they're really alarmed at the fact that he will give such extraordinary deference to such a fringe element of his base. I mean, Nick Fuentes is lucky to get 2,000 viewers on his live channel. I mean, it's a really far right, really extremist section of his base. And I think aides are really concerned that if he's giving such play to them, it will turn off other even more moderate MAGA Republicans because they really don't care. They don't appreciate for his extremist tendencies. And I think the other thing they're looking at, though, is the number of Republicans that come out and condemn Trump. Because right now you've got people like, Chris Christie, hitting on Trump for having dinner with Nick Fuentes, but you don't really see anyone else yet. And I think they're, breathing a sigh of relief, saying, look, we've been here before with Trump making problematic comments, whether it was Access Hollywood, whether it was, not condemning David Duke in 2016. And so the barometer they're using is if a lot of congressional Republicans, if potential nominees start criticizing Trump, then that's a bad sign, and that shows they're ready to start hitting Trump, and that could be a problem for the convention.
Yes, it could. Political investigations reporter for The Guardian, Hugo Lowell. Thank you very much for being on this morning. And still ahead on Morning Joe, a community in Idaho is still